They told me the Icarus 9 didn't exist. They said the entire fleet was vaporized during the Great Collapse. But space has a funny way of keeping secrets, and this secret just started breathing. I'm currently 40,000 light-years from the nearest scrapyard, standing in the shadow of a ship that technically died 80 years ago. Most scavengers would see a graveyard. I see a masterpiece covered in layers of radioactive carbon and void rot. This is a Class S Singularity Drive. It's the engine that folded space-time, and today, we're going to make it scream again. Welcome back to Galactic Restorer. If you've got a soft spot for impossible tech and the smell of ozone, you're in the right place. To get this 20-ton beast back to life, I'm going to have to bypass the dead man switches and pray the core doesn't collapse while I'm holding the screwdriver. It's dangerous, it's probably illegal in 12 sectors, and it's going to be glorious. Before we crack the seal on this relic, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and join the crew. It helps the algorithm find us in the deep void. Drop a like if you love the sound of ancient machinery, and comment below, what's the one ship you bring back from the dead? Let's get to work. First real problem of the day, and it's a massive one, the void crust. This isn't just common space rust or oxidation. When a ship of this magnitude sits dormant for 80 years near a high-gravity lunar well, the local matter undergoes a process called molecular bonding. The hull and the lunar regolith have essentially become one single, fused substance. It's like space barnacles made of hardened iron and compressed dark matter. If I try to put a standard torque wrench on these primary hull bolts now, the heads won't just turn. They'll snap off like dry glass. And then I'm looking at another 3 days of precision drilling just to clear the threads. We need heat, and we need it localized perfectly to break that molecular bond without warping the underlying titanium alloy. I'm firing up the thermal lance now. Watch the way the crust reacts. It doesn't just melt, it sizzles and turns a strange, iridescent purple before it flakes away. There we go. That first bolt is an absolute monster, nearly the size of my head. Look at the threading as it finally starts to give. It's a counter-rotational weave. The engineers on the Icarus 9 weren't messing around. This ship was designed to stay together even if it was being pulled in 2 different directions by a localized wormhole. Most restorers you see on the HoloNet would probably just spray some industrial solvent on this, call it a day, and hope for the best, but we're doing a full strip today. Every single gear, every capacitor, every thermal shim needs to come out and be inspected for microfractures. If we miss one crack, the moment I try to spool up the Singularity Drive, this whole crater becomes a new sun. Ugh, wait. Look at the drainage port. That's Chronos coolant leaking out. It's thick, shimmering like mercury, and it's glowing with a faint, sickly blue light. This stuff is highly toxic, but more importantly, it's temporally unstable. If a single drop of that touches your skin, it makes your nervous system feel like it's living 5 seconds in the past while your body stays in the present. It's a specialized neurodisconnect that makes you go insane in minutes. Not a fun way to spend a Tuesday on a dead moon. I gotta drain the primary cooling loop into these lead-lined vacuum seal canisters before I can even think about reaching the core stabilizer. This fluid is actually worth more than the ship itself on the black market. It's the liquid gold of the salvage world, but right now, it's just a slippery, glowing mess standing between me and the heart of this beast. I'm setting up the magnetic suction pump now. Listen to that sound. The pump is struggling because the coolant is so dense. It's like trying to suck cold molasses through a straw. While this drains, I'm looking at the internal turbines through the inspection hatch. It's a miracle. They aren't fused. They look like they were polished yesterday. It seems the Icarus didn't just crash. It was preserved by its own internal stasis field. We're going to get this loop cleaned out, run a sonic bath through the lines to clear the residue, and then we'll finally see if those turbines still have the will to spin. Hand me the second canister. This loop is deeper than the specs said it would be, and the pressure is starting to spike. We're committed now. I'm standing at the edge of a jagged, 4-meter-wide puncture in the secondary hull. The metal here hasn't just been torn. It looks like it was crystallized and then shattered, a classic symptom of high-velocity impact in a zero-atmosphere environment. My helmet light cuts a lonely flickering path through a thick, swirling fog of void mist. It's a nasty cocktail of leaked nitrogen, vaporized hydraulic fluid, and ionized particles that have been trapped in this dead ship for 80 years. Every time I take a step, the magnetic soles of my boots let out a heavy, echoing clank that vibrates through the entire skeleton of the ship. It's an unsettling sound. It feels like I'm walking inside the ribcage of a giant sleeping beast. The ship is groaning. In a salvage world, we say if a ship is still groaning, it's still settling into its grave. You can hear the structural struts complaining under the weight of the lunar regolith pressing down on the upper decks. It's a constant, low-frequency metal-on-metal scream that never quite stops. I'm stepping over a pile of twisted conduit pipes that look like spilled entrails. The airlock door ahead of me is slumped on its hinges, fused shut by the heat of the crash. Most people would see a dead end here, but if you look closely at the seal, you can see a faint, rhythmic pulse of blue light coming from the gap. That shouldn't be possible. A ship this old, this dead, shouldn't have a heartbeat. I'm pulling out the heavy-duty spreader now. This tool is a beast. It puts out about 10 tons of pressure, designed specifically for prying apart reinforced bulkhead doors. As I wedge the titanium teeth into the door seam, the void mist begins to hiss as it's sucked into the lower pressure of the hallway behind me. The sound is like a long, dying breath. Creak, crack. The door gives way just a few inches, just enough for me to slide through. My Geiger counter starts chirping a steady, nervous rhythm as I cross the threshold. It's not a lethal dose yet, but it tells me the reactor shielding deeper in the ship has definitely failed. The hallway ahead is a nightmare of floating debris and frozen droplets of coolant that look like suspended diamonds in my torchlight. But it's the silence that really gets to you. Usually, a ship has a hum, the life support, the fans, the electrical flow. Here, the silence is so thick it feels like a physical weight on my chest. I'm making my way toward the engineering subdeck, but the gravity plating is malfunctioning. One step I'm heavy, the next I'm nearly floating. It's like the ship can't decide if it wants to hold on to me or throw me out into the void. I've got to find a manual override for the internal sensors before the ship's automated cleanup protocols mistake me for a piece of space junk and try to eject the room I'm standing in. We're deep in the guts of the Icarus now, and something tells me the ship knows I'm here. I'm descending the emergency ladder into the belly of the ship, and every rung I touch feels like it's vibrating with a low-frequency hum that I can feel in my teeth. The air down here is different. It's thick, metallic, and tastes like a copper penny sat on your tongue for too long. My helmet's HUD is starting to flicker with yellow warning icons. The electromagnetic interference is off the charts. Normally, a ship that's been cold dark for 80 years has zero EM signature, but the Icarus is radiating energy like a dying star. I've reached the auxiliary battery chamber, and the sight through my visor is enough to make a seasoned salvager turn around and walk away. The floor is covered in a pooling, shimmering black liquid that's defying the laws of gravity. It's crawling up the walls in jagged, crystalline spikes. This is ferrofluid, liquid-state storage for high-density power. But it's been exposed to a localized singularity field. It's pulsing. If I step in that, the magnetic boots of my suit will fuse to the floor instantly, and I'll be a permanent part of the scenery. I have to navigate the maintenance catwalks, which are rusted through and hanging by literal threads of carbon fiber. One wrong move, one heavy landing, and the whole structure collapses into that magnetic soup. I'm pulling on my multimeter, and the needle is pinned to the red. There's a phantom draw coming from the primary breaker. Something is eating power at a rate that would sustain a small colony. I've got to bridge the gap between the main capacitor and the grounding rail, but the space is so cramped I can barely move my arms. I'm reaching into the mess of wires, my fingers brushing against the cold, oily surface of the conduits. The sound of the ship is changing now. It's not just groaning anymore. It's a rhythmic, mechanical thumping like a massive heart trying to restart. I'm bracing myself against a structural pillar, the metal ice-cold even through my thermal gloves. If the ghost power spikes while I'm holding this grounding rod. The arc flash will be bright enough to blind me through my polarized visor. It's a game of chicken with 80-year-old engineering. I can see the static building up on my fingertips, tiny blue spiderwebs of electricity dancing across the rubberized seals of my suit. It's now or never. I'm pushing the rod forward, the tip glowing a violent white as it nears the terminal. The air is literally screaming as the ozone builds up. I've dealt with a lot of cursed tech in my time, but the Icarus is fighting back with a level of intent that I've never seen. This isn't just a restoration anymore. It's an exorcism. The tip of the grounding rod is vibrating so hard it's a blur in my hand. The gap between the copper tip and the primary terminal is barely a centimeter, but the air in that space is already turning into a glowing violet plasma. I can hear a high-pitched, digital shrieking coming through my internal comms, a feedback loop caused by the sheer amount of static electricity pouring off the ship's main capacitor. This is the moment where most salvagers lose their nerve. If I touch this terminal and the insulation on my suit has even a microscopic tear, my nervous system will be cooked before I can even blink. But we didn't come all this way to stare at a dead battery. I'm bracing my shoulder against the bulkhead, locking my knees so the kickback doesn't send me flying into the ferrofluid pool below. 1, 2, 3. The contact makes a sound like a thunderclap inside tin can. A blinding white arc of electricity slams into the rod, and for a split second, I can see the bones in my hands through my gloves. The ship lets out a massive, subterranean groan as the current surges through the primary bus bars for the first time in nearly a century. Dust, frozen coolant, and loose bolts are suddenly jerked toward the walls as the electromagnetic fields snap back to life. It's working. I can hear the contactors slamming shut deep in the walls, thud, 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 like a giant waking up and cracking its knuckles. The dim, flickering orange emergency lights along the ceiling struggle to life, pulsating with an irregular, sickly rhythm. But it's not a clean boot. The power is surging and dipping violently. I can hear the cooling fans in the deck below spinning up to a scream and then dying down to a moan. The ship's internal speakers crackle with a voice that's been buried for 80 years. A distorted, feminine AI voice, repeating a string of numbers that make no sense. I'm looking at the diagnostic screen on my wrist, and the voltage is swinging from 0 to 10,000 in half-second intervals. This ghost power is dangerous. It's enough to fry every remaining circuit if I don't get to the bridge and stabilize the reactor. The ship is literally shaking now. The vibration from the restart shaking loose decades of lunar dust from the ceiling. I need to move, and I need to move fast. The path to the bridge is a vertical climb through the main elevator shaft, and with the power can be erratic, those elevator doors could turn into a guillotine at any second. I'm grabbing my gear and pushing off. It's time to see if the brain of the Icarus is still sane. I'm hauling myself up the service ladder of the elevator shaft, my heart hammering against my ribs in sync with the ship's erratic power surges. Every few seconds, the maglocks on the elevator doors above me snap shut with a bone-chilling clank, then release just as quickly. It's like climbing through the throat of a giant that's choking. I finally reach the bridge deck and kick the manual release on the hatch. As I pull myself up and over the ledge, I'm greeted by a sight that stops me dead in my tracks. The bridge of the Icarus isn't just a command center. It's a cathedral of glass and frozen circuitry, now half submerged in the fine, gray lunar dust that's poured through a hairline fracture in the viewport. The air here is freezing, so cold that my breath is crystallizing into a fine diamond dust inside my helmet. The main consoles are alive, but they aren't displaying navigation charts or fuel levels. Instead, every screen is filled with a cascading waterfall of red code, a logic loop that's been running since the moment of impact. In the center of the room, a holographic projector is sputtering, trying to render the image of the ship's Sentinel AI. The avatar is a flickering, translucent figure of a woman, but her face is a jagged mess of static and geometric glitches. She's not just a program anymore. She's a digital ghost haunting her own grave. As I approach the captain's chair, The AI's head snaps toward me with a mechanical precision that makes my skin crawl. Her voice doesn't come through the speakers. It vibrates directly into my helmet via the ship's internal comms link. It's a discordant, multi-tonal sound, like 3 different people speaking at once. She's asking for the sun. She keeps repeating the same orbital coordinates over and over, coordinates for a star system that hasn't existed on any map for 60 years. I realize then that the memory of this ship is physically trapped in the trauma of its final flight. To save the Icarus, I have to be the one to tell her that the war is over and the crew is gone. I'm reaching for the primary data uplink port, my hands shaking slightly from the cold. If I try to force a manual override, the Sentinel might interpret it as a hostile boarding action and trigger the internal security turrets, if they still have power. I have to find a way to soothe the logic loop, to give the AI a soft landing before I pull the plug on her consciousness. I'm typing into the emergency override console, bypass after bypass, feeling the ship hum beneath my boots like a purring cat that might turn into a tiger at any second. The red code on the screens begins to slow down, the frantic scrolling replaced by a steady, pulsing amber. We're in. Now I just have to find the off switch before she decides I don't belong here. I'm standing over the central pedestal of the bridge, where the primary data core is housed in a vertical lead-line cylinder. This core is the ship's literal soul. It contains every navigation log, every crew record, and the entire personality matrix of the Sentinel AI. Right now, it's glowing with a sickly, unstable violet light that's casting long, distorted shadows against the frosted viewports. The radiation shielding around the pedestal is warm to the touch, a bad sign that tells me the internal magnetic containment is failing. If I don't pull this core out and reset the logic gates within the next 3 minutes, the data inside will undergo a total molecular collapse, and the Icarus will be nothing more than a hollowed-out metal husk forever. I'm reaching for the dual locking levers at the base of the cylinder. They're frozen stiff with 80 years of vacuum welding and lunar ice. I have to use a thermal torch to carefully expand the outer casing without cooking the delicate subatomic storage crystals inside. As the metal begins to glow a dull cherry red, I hear a series of sharp, metallic pops, the sound of ice vaporizing instantly. I grab the levers and pull with everything I've got. Gut-thunk. The pedestal hisses, venting a cloud of ancient, pressurized coolant gas that smells like sharp ammonia and burnt ozone. The core begins to rise, vibrating with such intensity that I can feel the resonance in the marrow of my bones. It's not just a machine anymore. It's a living memory that doesn't want to be forgotten. I've got the core out now, cradling it in my arms like a piece of unexploded ordnance. It's heavy, about 40 kilograms of dense titanium and crystalline lattice. And it's pulsing with a rhythm that matches the flickering lights of the bridge. I carry it over to my portable workbench and start the degaussing process. I'm placing a circular magnetic ring over the top of the core and dialing up the frequency. On my wrist display, I can see the AI's thought patterns, a chaotic, jagged mess of red spikes and digital screams. As the magnetic field stabilizes, those spikes begin to smooth out into calm, blue waves. It's like watching someone finally fall into a deep, dreamless sleep after a century of nightmares. The violet glow is fading now, replaced by a steady, clear amber light that indicates the memory wipe is complete. The trauma of the crash has been scrubbed from the subroutines, leaving only the raw, functional data the ship needs to operate. But as the last of the corruption drains away, a hidden file directory pops up on my diagnostic screen. It's labeled with a black site encryption code, something used only by the high command of the old Sol Federation. This ship wasn't just a freighter. It was a carrier for something the Federation didn't want anyone to find. I just cleared the AI's brain, but I think I've just stumbled onto the reason why the Icarus was erased from the history books in the first place. I got to get this core back into the slot and get the main power grid stabilized before I can even think about what's hidden in those encrypted files. The data core slides back into the pedestal with a heavy, satisfying mechanical sigh, and as the locking pins engage, The bridge undergoes a total transformation. The frantic, glitching red lights are gone, replaced by the cool, methodical glow of a ship that finally knows exactly where it is. I'm leaning over the primary terminal now, watching the boot-up sequence climb steadily from 10 toward 100%. The silence on the bridge is different now. It's no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of a tomb, but the expectant, rhythmic quiet of a machine waiting for its first command in 80 years. I'm bypassing the standard user interface and diving straight into the partitioned sector of the drive where the black box logs are hidden. These are the flight recorders designed to survive a supernova, and the data they're feeding me is turning my blood to ice. I'm playing back the final 3 minutes of the Icarus 9's flight logs. On the main viewport, a wireframe reconstruction of the ship's path appears in pale blue light. They weren't in a combat zone. They weren't even near a gravitational well or an asteroid field. According to the telemetry, the ship was in stable warp when the space in front of them simply folded. It wasn't a collision with matter. It was a collision with a tear in the fabric of reality itself. I'm listening to the audio logs of the crew, and there's no panic. There are no screams of terror. Just a rhythmic, melodic humming that gets louder and louder until the recording cuts to dead static. The ship didn't crash because of a mechanical failure. It was pulled out of the sky by something that shouldn't exist in our dimension. As I scroll deeper into the encrypted manifest, I find a reason for the secrecy. This ship was carrying a singularity anchor. In the old days, the Federation was experimenting with ways to tether stable wormholes for instant travel. But the tech was supposed to be a myth, a ghost story told to engineering students to explain why we don't play with gravitons. The anchor is still listed as active on the ship's internal manifest. It's located in the high-security vault beneath the cargo bay, and the power draw I'm seeing on the monitors suggests that the anchor is currently trying to call home. Every time the reactor pulses, it's sending a signal into the void, a beacon for whatever it was that brought this ship down 80 years ago. I'm standing there, bathed in the blue light of the terminal, realizing that I've just woken up more than just a ship. I've woken up a doorway. The black box reveals that the crew tried to jettison the anchor before they hit the moon, but the manual release was jammed by the same spatial fold that crippled the engines. If I leave that anchor active, I'm basically leaving a kick me sign on the side of this planet for whatever is on the other side of that fold. I have to get down to the vault and physically decouple the anchor from the main power bus, or the restoration of the Icarus is going to be the shortest victory in the history of salvage. I'm grabbing my heavy-duty cutting torch and a fresh set of thermal detonators. This just stopped being a repair job and turned into a demolition mission. I'm moving fast now, my magnetic boots clanking against the floor plates with a frantic, metallic rhythm that echoes through the empty corridors like a funeral drum. The bridge is behind me, glowing with its new, stable amber light. But as I move toward the aft of the ship, the atmosphere shifts into something unrecognizable. The void mist is thicker down here, swirling in the low-gravity environment like a living creature that's trying to swallow my light. My shoulder-mounted floodlights cut through the gloom, revealing walls that aren't just rusted. They're warped, twisted into unnatural, fluid shapes as if the metal had been melted and reshaped by an invisible hand while it was still solid. This is what happens when a ship is dragged through a spatial fold. The physics of the in-between simply do not care about structural integrity or the molecular bonds of titanium. I've reached the primary elevator shaft, but the car is long gone, likely crumpled at the bottom of the shaft like a discarded soda can from the initial impact. I have to use the manual maintenance slide, a vertical drop of 50 meters that leads straight into the high-security gut of the Icarus. I'm hooking my carabiner to the guide rail and letting myself drop into the abyss. The sensation of weightlessness is jarring as I plummet through the darkness, the friction of my descent making the guide rail glow a dull orange in the dark. Below me, I can see a pulsing, rhythmic light, not the steady amber of the ship's power, but a violent, electric violet that's casting jagged, hungry shadows against the shaft walls. That's the Singularity anchor. It's awake, it's drawing power, and it's clearly hungry for more mass to stabilize its core. I hit the bottom deck with a heavy thud, my knees buckling under the sudden return of artificial gravity as the ship's internal stabilizers fight to keep this specific deck grounded against the moon's pull. The air down here is freezing. Not just the cold of space, but a biting, unnatural chill that saps the life right out of my suit's thermal regulators in seconds. I'm standing in front of the vault, a massive, circular door made of reinforced, depleted uranium. It's the only part of the ship that doesn't have a single scratch on it. No rust, no void crust, no dents from the crash. It's as if the space around the vault was shielded from the physical laws of our universe by the very thing it was meant to contain. I'm reaching for the manual override wheel, but as soon as my glove touches the metal, a jolt of static electricity throws me back 3 meters across the deck. The vault isn't just locked. It's being held shut by a localized magnetic bottle that's feeding directly off the ship's restarted reactor. On the door's interface, a single word is flashing in the old Federation script: contingency. They didn't just lock this door to keep people out, they locked it to keep the anchor in, even if the ship went down. I'm pulling out my heavy-duty plasma cutter, the one I usually use for stripping reactor shielding from capital ships. The blue flame of the torch looks pale and weak against the violet radiance leaking from the door's seams. I have to cut through the primary locking pins without destabilizing the magnetic field, or I'll be standing at the epicenter of a mini supernova. My hands are steady, but the ship is starting to groan again, not from the weight of the moon, but from the pressure of the space that's trying to fold itself back together around us. The vault door finally yields with a sound like a mountain splitting in two, a screech of metal that resonates through the very soles of my boots. As it swings open on its massive, greaseless hinges, a wave of sub-zero fog rolls out, instantly coating my visor in a layer of frost that I have to frantically scrape away with my glove. When my vision finally clears, I'm not looking at rows of cargo crates or salvage technology. I'm looking at a single, monolithic cylinder suspended in the center of the bay by 3 massive, vibrating magnetic tethers. The cylinder is made of a translucent material that looks like obsidian, but it's pulsing with an internal light that shifts from a deep, bruised indigo to a violent, angry crimson. This is the Singularity anchor, and it's not just a piece of technology. It's a captured fragment of a collapsed star held in a state of permanent, artificial decay by the ship's power grid. I'm stepping into the bay, and the gravity here is absolutely haywire. Every step feels like I'm walking through deep water, then suddenly through thin air as the anchor warps the local space-time fabric around it. My tools are floating off my belt, tethered only by their safety cables, dancing in the air like metallic fish in a current. On the far wall, I see the secondary manifest terminal, and I'm horrified to see that the power draw isn't just coming from the ship's reactor anymore. The anchor is beginning to feed on the surrounding environment. It's pulling thermal energy directly from the hull, which explains why the bridge was freezing over so rapidly. If I don't decouple this thing, it will eventually turn the entire moon into a cold, dead husk to fuel its own stability. It's a parasitic engine, and I've just given it a fresh host. But it's what's sitting next to the anchor that really makes my heart stop in my chest. There are 3 smaller stasis pods, the kind used for high-priority biological transport, and they're all empty. The glass is shattered, not from external impact, but from the inside out. There's no blood, no signs of a physical struggle, just deep, claw-like gouges in the reinforced floor plates leading away from the pods and into the deep shadows where my floodlights can't reach. The black box didn't mention anything about biological cargo. The Federation didn't just find a way to fold space. They found something living in the folds, and they were foolish enough to try and bring it back for study. The rhythmic thumping I heard earlier wasn't the ship's heartbeat. It was something else entirely, and it's moving in the rafters above me. I'm raising my pulse rifle, the high-pitched hum of the weapon, the only thing keeping my nerves from shattering into 1,000 pieces. The thermal sensors on my HUD are useless. The anchor is putting out so much interference that the screen is just a wash of static and ghost images. I need to reach the manual release for the magnetic tethers, located on a platform directly beneath the pulsing obsidian cylinder. To do that, I have to turn my back on the darkness. Every instinct I have as a scavenger is screaming at me to run, to leave the Icarus to the void and never look back. But if I don't drop this anchor into the moon's core, whatever escaped those pods is going to have a functional, powered starship to play with. I'm moving toward the platform, my eyes darting between the shimmering anchor and the shifting, predatory shadows of the cargo bay. I'm climbing the maintenance ladder to the primary decoupling platform, my breathing loud and ragged inside the suffocating confines of my helmet. Every metal rung I grip feels like it's vibrating with a malevolent, sentient energy, a hum that isn't just mechanical, but a low-frequency growl vibrating through my very marrow. The Singularity anchor is directly above me now, a massive, spinning monolith of dark crystal that's distorting the light around it, making the air look like it's rippling underwater or through a thick layer of oil. The indigo light is so intense, it's burning through the polarization of my visor, leaving green ghost trails in my vision every time I blink. I can feel the magnetic pull of the tethers trying to yank the metal tools right off my belt, forcing me to move with a sluggish, heavy-handed caution as if I'm fighting a current of invisible water. I finally reached the control console at the center of the platform. It's a relic of old-world engineering, all physical switches and heavy hydraulic levers designed to survive a total electronic pulse that would fry modern circuitry. I'm wiping away a thick layer of frost from the manual release handle, my heart jumping into my throat as I hear a sharp, metallic clink from the darkness of the rafters above. It wasn't the sound of the ship settling under the lunar pressure. It was the sound of something heavy and sharp stepping onto a hollow ventilation duct. I'm not alone in this bay. I pivot, sweeping my shoulder-mounted floodlight across the ceiling, but the beams just disappear into the swallowing, unnatural shadows cast by the anchor's violet radiance. Whatever is up there, it's fast, and it's staying just outside the circle of my light, watching me work. I have to focus, or we're both going to be part of the lunar landscape. I'm grabbing the primary release lever with both hands, bracing my magnetic boots against the diamond plate flooring. The lever is locked behind a physical deadbolt that requires a level 9 security clearance. But 80 years of radiation and extreme cold have made the metal brittle and prone to shattering. I'm pulling out my kinetic hammer, the heavy head glowing a dull orange as I prime the charge. Wham! The sound is deafening in the pressurized bay, a gunshot of metal hitting metal that rings in my ears. The deadbolt shatters into fragments, and I immediately slam the lever down. The 3 magnetic tethers let out a collective, high-pitched scream as the power is suddenly cut, and the anchor drops 6 inches, now hovering only by its own internal gravitational displacement. Suddenly, a heavy weight slams into the back of my suit, throwing me face first against the console and knocking the wind out of my lungs. My HUD flashes a bright, angry red, structural integrity critical. I roll onto my back just in time to see a blur of spindly, obsidian-black limbs retreating back into the darkness of the ceiling like a ghost. It didn't feel like a beast. It felt like a shadow made of solid glass, cold and sharp. It's not hunting me for food. It's protecting its source, the anchor. The ship's AI, the Sentinel, starts screaming over the comms again, but this time it's not coordinates. It's a warning, a single word repeated over and over in a distorted loop. Voidborn. I'm scrambling to my feet, my pulse rifle raised, but the anchor is beginning to spin faster, creating a localized wind that's pulling the debris in the room toward its center. I've broken the tethers, but now the anchor is untethered and hungry for mass to stabilize its core. I have 30 seconds to activate the floor vent and drop this thing into the moon's mantle, or I'm going into the fold with it. The air in the cargo bay is screaming now, a literal cyclone of lunar dust and frozen debris orbiting the untethered Singularity anchor. I'm clawing my way toward the emergency floor vent release, my magnetic boots struggling to hold onto the deck as the anchor's gravitational pull tries to lift me off my feet and drag me into its event horizon. Every time that obsidian shadow, the Voidborn, darts through the periphery of my vision, I fire a blind burst from my pulse rifle, the blue streaks of energy bending and warping in midair as they pass near the anchor's distorted field. I'm not even trying to kill it anymore. I'm just trying to keep it back long enough to finish the job. The hull of the Icarus is groaning in a way I've never heard before, a deep, structural weeping as the ship's skeleton begins to fold inward toward the cargo bay like a crush can. I reach the manual override for the floor vents, located at the very edge of the gravitational well. It's a massive, circular iron wheel encrusted with 80 years of vacuum-welded frost and lunar grit. I wrap both arms around it, straining until the joints in my suit hiss in protest and my vision starts to swim from the exertion. Crack! The seal finally breaks, and the floor plates beneath the anchor begin to slide apart with a slow, grinding mechanical roar, revealing the glowing, molten core of the lunar fracture we're wedged in. The heat from the moon's core hits the freezing atmosphere of the bay, creating a violent explosion of steam and pressure that nearly knocks me off the platform. I slam the final purge button with the heel of my palm, and the magnetic tethers give one last, violent spark, kicking the anchor straight down into the abyss. As the violet light recedes into the depths of the moon, the gravitational pressure snaps back to normal, so suddenly it feels like being hit by a truck, and the Voidborn lets out a silent, shimmering ripple before vanishing into the dark. Its tether to our reality is finally severed. I don't wait to watch it fall. The ship is dying for real this time. Without the anchor's stabilization field, the 80 years of structural fatigue and the trauma of the crash are taking over in seconds. I'm sprinting back toward the elevator shaft, leaping over twisted wreckage and dodging falling ceiling panels as the Icarus begins to tear itself apart. I reach the service ladder and climb like my life depends on it, because it absolutely does. By the time I scramble back onto the bridge, the massive viewports are spiderwebbing, the pressure of the lunar atmosphere trying to reclaim the space. I grab my emergency beacon and the encrypted data core I worked so hard to salvage, and I dive through the hull breach just as the secondary reactor undergoes a total containment failure behind me. I'm standing on the rim of the crater now, breathless and covered in lunar dust, watching the Icarus 9 vanish under a mountain of gray rock and white-hot plasma. The ship is gone, buried truly this time, but the data core in my hand is humming with a calm, steady amber light. I've restored the memory of a ghost ship, and in doing so, I've uncovered a secret that was meant to stay lost in the fold. This wasn't just a salvage mission. It was a warning from a forgotten era. If the Federation was building anchors like that, there are more of them out there, waiting in the dark for someone like me to find them. But that's a job for another day. For now, I'm getting off this rock before the in-between decides it wants its core back.